Hey guys.
Just had to, I was digging in the garage after our call. I think these calls are going to be known for the South Africa versus New Zealand saga.
For the banter that they have, yeah.
Oh,
Let's wait a few more minutes to see if we have people coming in.
Hello.
Anton.
Hey Anton.
Hello. Hello.
Esteban. Hey, Shota.
Yeah, do you know if we have
Dave.
Björn joining?
I'm not sure if Bjorn's joining, but let me just follow up with Dave as well.
Ah, there he is.
Hello. Hey everyone.
Hey everyone. Sorry, let me just see if I can. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Wait. There we go. Yeah, so let's oh, I have a Zoom user joined as a guest. Let's get started though. I think we have a small agenda, but an interesting one. We'll try to be a little bit better in sharing the agenda beforehand via the page that we have on Confluence on Hyperledger. It just sort of wasn't part of my system just yet, so sorry about that. But welcome to the second Open Enterprise Agent call that we've held. As we are part of Hyperledger, I want to make you aware of the antitrust policy notice and also the Hyperledger Code of Conduct that we should all adhere to. So we can have banter, but just not too much banter, I guess. This meeting has 5 items. Following the introduction in a minute, Fayad will have a short community update. Dave will drive a conversation about security practices that we would like to see in the project. And that's followed by myself, sort of with a conversation about how should we be communicating with the community about the roadmap and things like that. If at any point you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll try to address that. Do we have any new participants that we need to welcome? I don't think we do. If not, we can continue with this point. Fayad.
Oh, okay. So for the community update, we officially have a Discord server. So if you guys have not signed up for the Discord server, I will be posting a link in the chat a little bit later. So invite to our Discord server. Please join. Give us some feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. In addition to that, we haven't formally announced that our lab is actually officially with Hyperledger. We are planning a formal announcement on the 28th of November. So keep a lookout for Twitter and LinkedIn. And we will also be having a Open Enterprise Agent community launch. So that will happen on the 5th of December. We'll also be posting more details about that at a later stage. Generally, what we'll be going over through that call is what the lab is about, just a quick demo of the agent. We'll also have a community member coming to show what they built using our tools. We'll also have a nice discussion about our roadmap and where you can view our roadmap. And last but not least, how you can get involved if you do want to become a contributor as well as a maintainer. So yeah, that's it from my side in terms of the community update, just short and sweet.
Cool. Do we want to do any sort of external invites, sort of beyond the quick demo that what has already been built? Do we want to do active reach out to people that we know to that party?
Yeah, so we are reaching out to a couple of people that we know. Only 2 of them have come back so far to us to say that they'd love to do a demo. We have given them the date and the time of the 2. Only 1 has come back and said they can make that date in time. But yeah, we are opening it up to anyone else that would love to do a quick demo of what they built using our tools as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Anybody have any questions, suggestions for a good Open Enterprise Agent community launch? Feel free to raise it here or put it in the chat. We would love to sort of make this a good kickoff session for the wider community. So also spread the love on Twitter. I would say. David.
Thank you, Bart. So for this section, it's very much to provoke a discussion. So I've got a couple of slides that kind of put some points in that we can start thinking about and talking about. It's been driven by looking around at the tooling that we can use for increasing the security at a code level of the software that we're writing. So I just want to kind of talk through a couple of things for a few minutes and then go into a discussion. And hopefully this will just light a few fires and get you thinking around what are the things we can do. So on the first slide, I've just kind of put down a list of all the practices that one can start doing or the things they can think about with respect to security. I'm not saying, so this is an example list. This is not about doing all these things. This is about trying to basically say, hey, these are all the sorts of things we could think about. And it starts with thinking about things in our development lifecycle. So as we're writing software, we can think about doing threat and risk assessments. We can think about scanning our code for ways that we've written it that may be insecure using static application security testing. We can think about doing penetration testing, where we're actively trying to break the software, which is called dynamic application security testing. And we can look at the third-party libraries that we use to make sure that they're compliant from a license perspective, but also themselves don't have vulnerabilities. That's software composition analysis. So those are very much the what we do in our development lifecycle at specific times, either automated or manual. But there's also things that we can engineer into our application. So for example, we can say, actually, we really care about the security of the data that's held within the OEA. Let's make sure we have strong encryption on every bit of data that's stored. And let's make it check for encryption in transit when it's doing operations. And kind of extending that list of the things that we can build, it can include secure authentication, using third-party authentication libraries, being compliant to industry standards, which is probably quite an easy one for us, being standards interoperable anyway. But then looking into being, regulatory compliant. So for GDPR, for example, being able to identify where an error PII might be stored and being able to delete that. And that may be a very simple API for deletion, but it's still something we've got to decide that we want to implement and build. We may look at it and say, actually, what memory isolation? So from a multi-tenant perspective for security, we might actually want to build a feature. And then there's the more standard stuff like the OWASP top 10 and doing sort of like a input validation when you have APIs. Now with this list, a lot of the tooling, like the static application testing tooling, is what will actually pick it up. But these are the things that we're actually implementing in the application. The last part is, we have things in our repository which are infrastructure related. It's like Helm charts, how to deploy in Kubernetes, and we package into containers. So do we want to talk about security tooling for running scans on the container, making sure they're not privileged, making sure they don't include any bloat of software that may be compromised in the future, scanning the Helm charts for best security practices, and making sure that if you deploy it with no configuration settings, everything fails securely by default. So these are like a really high level list of just things that have been on my mind in terms of things that we could be doing or could be talking through. These are solutions, right? These are like the end things you either pick tools for, or you start building towards, or you pick features for. On the next slide are, a better starting point for us, which is let's decide on the principles of what we're going to do. I've started to sort of write some down, some that I think are wrong as well, just to get a discussion going. But I think that deciding on these principles will allow us to pick, what tools we want to do and what efforts we want to make to making the code base secure and the application itself secure. So one very popular one, which is a wide-reaching one, which is secure by design, private by design, security and privacy by design. And this can include sort of us going, yes, we want to make sure that it is secure, and we will, from a requirement, definition time all the way to it being ship time, build things into our practices and processes to make sure it's secure. Audit, reviews, tooling. I put a few more down here. I'll read through them all and I'll open the floor to any discussion points. I mean, I'm just looking for people to kind of like put forward ideas, but at this point, doing things manually is quite expensive. There's lots of tooling. So I'd say actually looking at automation for security and automating away the tool is a good idea. I think we should have these security practices embedded in our quality practices. So as part of a release process, we make sure that it's secure. We've ticked off some of the security items to make sure it's ready for release. We should look at the third-party dependencies that we have, and we should make an effort towards scanning those for vulnerabilities so that we know that when we ship it, there are some, we've had a best practice of making sure that they don't have vulnerabilities in. This is not an absolute science, by the way. Supply chain security, and this is very difficult. It's a very hot topic right now. I'm not saying that we'll be able to 100% guarantee and there's no vulnerabilities in it, but we should have a practice and a process that shows us so we take it seriously and that we understand how to detect it and also remediate it if they are found. And this could include things like being notified of security vulnerabilities and having a channel for it and an email address to get issues and classifying them. I think that if we do provide ways to run it in production, that we harden those. We either make the stance that we don't provide things in production and it's up to you to run it in a production type way, or if we're going to provide them, we make sure they adhere to certain other standards so we know that it was going to fail securely or be secure by default. And by secure by default, I mean that if you forget to set the configuration setting for the database password, it isn't blank. It's something very difficult or it's disabled so you can't access it. So all these sorts of practices mean that if someone isn't paying attention when they deploy it, they know when they deploy it, it's secure, and they have to actively try to make it insecure. And I'm sure that there are many more practices and principles that we can talk through. And I'll open the floor in a second. My feelings are that we should look at sort of a set of principles that allow us to secure the code at a code level and decide on a very simple solution to trial, and then work our way through the principles so that we all agree this is what we want to do. This is where we want to put the effort in. I'll stop talking there. Open the floor up for any points or any responses to that. I greatly appreciate it.
I like this, and at the same time, I feel that I'm on the fence for some of this, and I'm sort of trying to figure out why. And I think the closest I can get to is like accessibility of the project, which is like, hey, we can have all these security practices and we can have like principles around that. But they do all sort of increase the barrier to entry for participation. Now, that may not matter, but it might matter a little bit. could we take some of these principles or reframe some of these principles where they are also focused on potential contributors to sort of so to give an example, saying if I'm sort of mediocre engineer like I am and I would like to contribute, it's in the interest of the project to not allow for shitty contributions, but it would also be nice if I would become a better, more security aware engineer in the process. So my question is, like, can we envision some of the principles that would also offer helpful tools that lower that barrier to entry, but make the people like better engineers as they go along?
Does anyone else have any comments or experiences of other projects they work on they'd like to talk through? What do you guys envision for this project?
Yeah, I have some notes. So I agree that everything listed here is very important, but I wanted to highlight one topic that is becoming very hot as we go open source, is the continuous integration pipeline security. Because right now, we are using the GitHub Actions, which is very insecure. And basically one small mistake in the CI pipeline can give a malicious actor an access to the whole infrastructure that we use to run end-to-end test, for example, and can compromise the API keys. So I believe that we need to have some additional checks and procedures, probably proper reviews or responsible guys to really pay attention on this kind of things. So right now with Ellen, we're investigating the possible attacking vectors already. So we're trying to make sure that our current implementations are fine, but we are still finding a lot of things that can be improved and fixed. And probably in the near future, we'll do these updates. Because with our new collaboration mechanism through forks and all of that, it opens the wide range of attacks that can be possible. So we need to be very careful here. And this also applies restrictions on what we can test for pull requests. So for example, if we will use our seed environment in pull request testing, there is no way to protect the security API key. So it applies the restrictions on what we can test even. So this is what I wanted to say, and we need to pay attention to that.
Thanks, Anton. That's a really good point. And I've seen lots of articles recently about securing the pipelines to the point where people can write malicious code and have it executed on an automatic build system that does something nefarious, and there's no controls in place for that. It's quite a hot topic for generative AI at the moment and detection systems, so it's going to be an interesting one over the next few years. But I've made a note of that, and I just wanted to point out that's a really good point, and I completely missed it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Another thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Go on.
Yeah, just it reminded me about the static analysis that is already enabled, right? But we actually don't have a process to review or make sure that the issues it finds are fixed or even triaged or something like this. So probably we also need to discuss the way forward, because we have like few hundreds of small code smells and probably some critical issues found by even static analysis. Regardless, we don't have anything dynamic yet. So this is also one hot topic that we should start pay attention to.
from an operational perspective, Dave, how do you envision that working, right? So if we have a community of maintainers, and there's contributors, and there's users, and I'm trying to figure out sort of how to fit it all together. And one of the reasons that I'm also asking, saying, well, if a group of maintainers or contributors takes responsibility for a part of that, what does it mean for like from a liability perspective towards the users? Right. So let's assume this group of maintainers in this call would say, well, we're going to install some sort of automated testing thing, or we're going to do a security audit, publish the results and everything. And sort of further downstream, something goes wrong. Like where does that mean? Do we know if that means anything from a responsibility perspective? Or are we saying, no, we're just for informational purposes only?
So I have done some thinking on this, but before I talk around how I see it working out, I'd love to hear from other engineers who've had experiences of a project to say, hey, actually, this is how we'd like to work. Much to your question, but around what are the expectations of developers working on it? Because I think that's one of the interesting points. Fabio definitely has something to say, but can't unmute. Faye, could you possibly unmute Fabio? Mission to.
Yeah, I'm going to try that now. Give me 2 seconds. Fabio, can you try now?
I'm looking at the security settings from Zoom, and I can see that all participants should be allowed to unmute themselves.
Fabio is no longer muted from the readout here.
I guess he has no microphone available in Zoom. Probably
Yeah.
some
Fabio,
permissions.
could you check your input settings, audio input settings in Zoom? That might be the issue.
Does anybody hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's how we hear you.
Okay.
Shota, have you got a particular view you wanted to put forward here, or any comments you wanted to put forward while waiting for Fabio?
Well, let me just put my thoughts. I'll have something to say maybe later.
No worries. Cool. Well, look, while Fabio's leaving and joining, and when we hear it, I'll hand to him.
I just wanted to comment about Antoine. So he was mentioned about the pipelines, and what I have seen on other projects is sometimes they disable the pipeline totally until they got some approval from one of the maintainers. So the pipeline only runs once one maintainer writes something on gives permission for the pipeline to run. Or they also have pipelines that don't have any of the permissions. So they don't have that environment variables and secrets. So no one that's running the pipeline can somehow escape and get access to those systems.
Yeah, we're actively also investigating this. This is a nice thing to allow the run pipeline for pull requests. We don't expect like dozens of contributions every day, so probably this can be a thing. Yeah, we're also thinking about filtering. For example, if it's a fork, you run one set of tests, right? That without any secrets, for example, right? And if it's an internal pull request, you basically can do whatever you want. So there are some mechanisms to do so.
And about what Bart was mentioned of learning and have security on those pull requests and learn more about security, usually are the maintainers that helps new incomers to learn, or usually the security is maintained by the maintainers. So when someone new do a pull request, they usually try to fix something that they need to be fixed, and if there are any security concern, usually are the maintainers that help improve the code and explain why that is a problem. So in my opinion, we should like invest on tickets for new maintainers to start, like easy tickets, or instead of being concerned about those security things, because I think when a new pull request comes, we can like invest time in that moment.
So I wanna drive on that a little bit, because I'm a big fan of templates. I'm also a big fan of simple templates that allow for enough flexibility. I do feel that sort of like this is one of those things where one of the ways you could help engineers is by doing a very simple risk assessment sort of before you start the work, rather than after the work and analyze, saying, hey, do you think that this is going to touch on a few things? Even if it's not fully correct, I think there might be ways where we can help people start getting into the right mindset. Even if it's just sort of clicking a few checkboxes, but just asking that question and saying, hey, is this piece of code going to touch like cryptographic operations? Oh, okay, so that should sort of already flag something. Then I'm sort of trying to figure out what's the right balance to that, because I also agree with you, Fabio. It's like with everything that we are prescriptive, we are increasing the barrier. So I think we definitely need to find the right barrier there. So Shota, to your point, yeah, I would say people outside the company, right? So for me, like we're in the Open Enterprise Agent Lab here, so we're all maintainers and contributors, and so the project as it is doesn't have any processes and practices around it from a community perspective. Given that most of the people here are from Atala and IOG, obviously inside that company, we have processes and practices. So I think the question here is saying, to what extent do we introduce those processes and practices to the project as a whole, so that anybody who comes in, whether you are working for IOG or Atala or some other company, BlockTrust, RootsID, and you want to contribute, we can make sure that you adhere to certain processes. And how do we make sure that those processes aren't too heavy for people to say, well, you know what, I'm not even gonna bother because this is not for me.
And I think we've highlighted two orthogonal but distinct things now, which is I started it with the remit of how do we make sure that when someone's running this application in their own infrastructure in the cloud, that it's secure, that it runs securely and doesn't have vulnerabilities or lose data or get attacked easily. And the second part we've moved on to as well, which has been more of a recent focus just now in our conversation, was, how do we make sure our build tools can't be taken advantage of? So actually how we're building and how we're developing it. And they are both very important topics. One's a bit wider, one's a bit easier, more of a not a short term, but a slightly more localized thing to do. I think just quickly to recap the notes, just conscious of time so far, the principles, actions, however you want to define them, as we've got so far, is ensure we can accept contributions with a low barrier to entry, ensure our automation tools are protected from abuse. So for example, run the pipeline and you want to maintain a comments or renewed or limit what the pipeline can do. have a process and take advantage of the tools that we link in. For example, static code analysis, like it's good to run a tool, but unless you take the output of it and action it and make it valuable, there's not much point in having that tool linked to it. And then back to the TAR or the risk assessment, but have a template, have something to fill in at the point of feature definition before you start the work to help assess the impact to security. I mean, that's a very nice light touch process. We can say, okay, well, you are building an extension module that can run arbitrary code. We need to go through this level of security assurances for this. This is a higher impact to security. And I think there's a small sort of checklist or flow chart we can put in place to assess that.
Yeah. I want to add maybe a few things. One is, and I think Anton or Fabio raised it, about we should have maintainers as a point of contact to be security aware, which means that it should probably be part of agendas or a working group or some sort of process. The other one is regarding issues and publications of issues. For example, code audit, external code audits, like do we publish them? I mean, we've said as part of our principles from Atala's perspective is we will do a external code review on all major releases, and we will publish the findings of those in public under principle of responsible disclosure. I know in IOG we have a security group that sort of receives emails in case of bugs that are found that need to be disclosed in a responsible manner. I suggest we have a similar thing in this group as well. And I think that's mostly it, right? So I think in order for it to become part of the mindset, I think the first step is to start talking about it, like making it visible and sort of like, hey, here's the things that are coming out of an audit that we know, and sort of rather than just start automating and trying to prevent everything, like especially like risk assessment is something in some cases we can accept some risks. Yeah, add a security policy to the repo with contact details. I think that's also a very good point. What would be a good follow-up step for this if we were talking about action items? Should we craft sort of a very simple like security policy and sort of put all the things in there?
I was thinking, I mean, yes, absolutely to that. The first smallest step I was going to suggest is that on our pool review template or on our contribution guidelines, I have thought about the security of my work, or I write down the security implications, just in terms of pool, because that's so easy to do, and it just gets people contributing and our developers to think about security, and they just write a little statement like, I thought about it, and I'm changing crypto, and they might need to ask, but it's very small. Following that, yes, we do need a security policy, which I'd be very happy to draft with the input I've got from the call for review, put it out in an async document for us to contribute to and comment on. And I think that the next part is kind of, it does step a little bit into solutions, but there's lots of free tools that we can kind of attach to get a sense of our current level of security. Because I think right now, if we've got a really good level, that's great, and it's about ongoing processes. But if we've got a really poor level and we've got more work to do, and I'd like to know that sooner rather than later, so we can plan accordingly in terms of feature and bandwidth and what our releases need to look like.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. I just wanted to get maybe to close off this topic, maybe Anushka or Esteban's point of view after Anton, because he politely raised his hand, and that gives them some time to think as well, to sort of get their perspective, maybe from an implementer perspective, sort of people that would use the code coming out of our repos, sort of what their expectations are. But I'll give Anton the floor first, so you have some time to think about that question.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight one topic also that, so for sure we had all these security audits, we have internal, external one. We're speaking about the security tools and so on, automated ones. But one thing that is always here is like security of all the identity protocols and the flaws that these protocols could have possibly. I mean, for example, we can like say that DITCOM is secure, right? Probably, but I remember we discussed with Fabio some vectors about how we can fail the mediator and so on and so on. So I guess for the Prism node, there are some cases that I discussed with Ezekiel that also are not 100% secure and we don't test them. So some sophisticated attack can happen on these levels. So these ones are very difficult to find, very difficult to handle and automate. So probably we need to also like write down some points how we can review the code to make sure that these vectors are covered. And also for sure like libraries that we use and like probably involve the R&D team more in our processes, because we have very nice guys there that can help us to understand that we're secure in some points. So yeah, that was my point. That's it.
Yeah, I think I like that point. It spurs a thought that maybe we want to publish in the repo some, or on related to sort of on the wiki, some security related work that either some of the maintainers here have done or from the community, and saying, hey, there's some things that we know are out there. I mean, we've done some work on things like AnonCreds. We are, I think, done or very close to being done to formally verifying sort of the DIT Prism method, and sort of we can talk a lot about that and share a lot of information about that, which might also be helpful for other community members that might want to do the same thing, or that are sort of evaluating the Open Enterprise Agent as part of a wider stack. So that might also be something where we want to create some space in on GitHub where we share that information. I think that would be very good also to sort of reinforce the security thinking and mindset. Esteban, I see you've come on camera, so I'm hoping you have a strong opinion.
No, I mean, giving a little bit of perspective of why an external party wants to use our open source offering, or however we want to call it. And it's not an easy answer, because there are a variety of reasons why people approach us. There are cases that we have, like Bjorn, like Bruce ID at the beginning, where was people very enthusiastic on the SSI technical matters, and they wanted to develop that technology. Those are rare exceptions. We get less and less of that as times goes by. And what we find more nowadays is people that wants to build or wants an identity solution. Because we are somehow associated to Cardano. A lot of the people that approach us is related to Cardano blockchain, DApps, that kind of people. And what they are looking in us is an identity solution that they can plug directly to their solutions. Most of the time that gets surprised a little bit, because what we offer is not necessarily what they are expecting. Probably they expect something more like a platform like what Proof Space offers. And then we come and say, oh, but you have SDKs and this agent and this mediator and this beautiful stuff, but you need to develop the application layer. So many of the times they are not expecting that. So that may come as a surprise. But there is a lot of work that we try to do to keep these people engaged with us and convince them that, yes, you will need to develop maybe a little bit more than what you expected, but it will be something that is worth the effort. So a lot of the time people is not necessarily thinking on being a contributor in the sense that you expect in an open source project, like they are going to create features and add functionality and help with things that are missing. But sometimes you can work that with the people and start convincing them so they can consider being that kind of contributor. One example is with one project on New Zealand that we have been talking with. The idea is that help them be embraced by the community. There are things that they have in their use case that we currently don't have implemented, but I have been talking with them to try to, okay, maybe join the community and also join the effort. And if there are features that you require, maybe you can help as well in this open source effort and help contributing with some features here and there. So there is a process of trying to change a little bit of the mindset of the people that comes to use Prism in a way that they embrace the open source concept and not just wanting to use Prism. We are going to get a little bit of everything, but I think that one of the things that people is looking from us is a little bit of clarity of where we are going with the project. A lot of times people hesitated on using Prism because they were not sure if we were going to pursue a commercial model or an open source model or a mix in between. And I think that having this clarity on, okay, now we are committing to the open source part is good because the people that approaches our team to use Prism, now they can see, okay, so it's an open source project. I can embrace this as an open source offering and I can take the decisions accordingly, and they have the certainty of what the project is about. So as you can see, it's a little bit of a weird response, but the thing is that we get a lot of everything. People that want to build SSI technology, people that only want to use Prism, people that is looking only for a solution, people that was looking for a solution but may agree to also work on developing that technology and also building their own platform. So I think that the most important thing to do is have transparency of where we are going with the project, what are going to be doing in terms of helping people to contribute. And contributions don't necessarily need to be only code directly to the repositories. It can be a contribution like reporting a bug. Something as simple as that is a contribution. Maybe even helping with documentation, maybe even helping in the Discord channels, answering questions from other community members, maybe sharing experiences on what they do to integrate Prism in their platforms, like having a little bit of cross-pollination in projects that use Prism, and they can share experiences and how they tackle certain technical challenges that they find. So the spectrum is very broad. It's hard to say like concretely how this is going to looks like, but I think that this effort will help us regain the momentum that we had at some point in engagement with the community. And hopefully this time, because we are providing clarity, it will help us to move forward even further in the development of Prism.
Okay. I think you mentioned something which I think is incredibly important. It's a mixed bag, so we see all sorts of different use cases. I think maybe one of the key tenets to these principles should be like, it should be really hard to build something that creates harm from a security and privacy perspective with our stuff. Like we cannot prevent all bad things from happening, but I think it should be one of the core ambitions, right? We're working on identity systems. They are incredibly prone to misuse on all sorts of levels. Let's make sure we do everything we can to build something that is easy to secure or hard to make insecure. Anushka.
Yeah, so I totally experienced a lot of what Esteban has said and 100% agree with him. And I think another perspective I would like to add is, from within a corporate. So from within a corporate, Fayyad and I have been playing around with SSI tooling, and it's really hard for innovation teams to always get technical developers to do stuff. But if a technical developer got involved, they'd want to do something really quickly, create a POC, find what they need to get going and go fast. And then they would want to not just be able to tell a decision maker about, hey, this tech is so cool, we can do these things, but they'd want to be able to show and tell, this is how we can improve our business processes so that we can actually get funding to do something real. So I think from an implementer perspective, just getting out of the starting blocks, the documentation is going to be important, and the ability for someone to get started quickly. And I think we started covering that in our docs. So that is quite cool. And it will be really nice to see how people accept that to move forward from an implementer perspective. So it's just that corporate lens that I wanted to also share.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. The word that springs to mind is assurances. Right, having been in some of those situations myself as well, and I think many of us probably have. Like you build something, and you get a lukewarm response saying, "Yeah, that works like really nicely," but like our CISO will never approve of this because this like is in violation of 10 HIPAA and GDPR rules. So unless you can prove that you're not, right? So if you can build something in this corporate environment. And the subsequent story is also about, oh, and by the way, we did it in such a way that it meets like the requirements that are in place here. I think you have a much stronger story, and that could help drive adoption there, because there's a lot of unknowns in SSI about, okay, how does governance work and things like that. So if we can already preempt that on the security front, that sort of helps implementers sort of skip a step in the whole conversation. So I think that's it's a very useful point. Very good that you raised it. Both of you raised another point, which is sort of brings me, and thanks for the bridge on the agenda, which brings me out setting expectations towards the community, and very concretely saying, hey, how should we communicate a roadmap, which is already implying that we should communicate a roadmap, which not every open source project does, right? If you look at something like Signal, it doesn't have a roadmap. It's like things are ready when they're ready. I feel we should, for the reasons just mentioned by you, Esteban, to sort of say, hey, let's make sure we set expectations clearly so people can build on us, right? I think that's also a very important principle that we should keep in mind. But we should also realize that Open Enterprise Agent is part of a wider set of components that jointly comprise of SSI solutions. So mediators, wallet SDKs, in our case, the VDR, which probably should be part of the Open Enterprise Agent. But there can also be like different mediators and different SDKs. So I think there's something interesting there. I'm getting to your point, Shota. I'm getting to your point. So there's a bunch of questions, like where should we communicate our roadmap? Because the last time I counted, there's more than 2 handfuls of repositories that all have work in them that relate to the Open Enterprise Agent. Or do we want to say no? We just want to keep it here. And I think the underlying question there is like, how should we deal with discovery? Saying, hey, if you come into the Open Enterprise Agent, how would you ever discover, for example, that other mediators exist and sort of how in sync they are with this project? Does that mean that they should be part of this project? I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on that. But I think for the project as a whole, I think we should communicate our roadmap, similar to documentation, right? Because we've migrated from Atala Prism, currently it's like docs.atalaprism.io. I'm going to assume and almost hope that for many of the new people coming into this project, Atala Prism is going to be a pretty meaningless term because they're going to come to the Open Enterprise Agent. So that raises a question as to say, hey, where do we publish things? And then the second question is, what should we communicate in a roadmap? Within Atala, we have PI planning, we have features and dates. I think that's going to be very hard to maintain in an open source fashion. So my proposal would be to just do a high level planning. So now, next, later, and maybe some target versions if we want to keep a monthly stable release cadence, which is also up to the maintainers and up to the community. I think across different repositories, we should have consistent status and priorities to be communicated and sort of to be able to cascade up certain things that might have dependencies. And then do we talk about, do we put PRs in our roadmap, or do we just talk about issues? Or do we want to create epics or something like that? So that's sort of the sets of questions that I have, and I'd love to have a discussion until we run out of time. I've worked a little bit on a sort of proposal for this. It's on GitHub, and I'm working with a couple of people in this call on elaborating on that, just to also give a view of what this could look like. So this is a GitHub project. It's very simple. It pulls information from different repositories. And this is where, for example, you can see, well, if the different repositories need to have consistent labeling practices, which is quite important, because otherwise the aggregation doesn't make any sense, and it's really hard to put automation in place to show what things are happening. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and I'll sort of give the floor to any of you who would like to share their opinion on the roadmap. Let me ask a simple question, because I see you will struggle to unmute yourself. Does it make sense to have a roadmap for contributors and for implementers and users of this project?
I would say yes, because I think we figured out that we needed that for in Jira for the team today. So why won't we have that for the contributors? And I mean, I think everything should be listed in that kind of table. We should have. It's working in Jira, I think, today. So maybe we could just transpose that to GitHub. That's what we plan to do, I think. So I would really, yeah, at least myself appreciate to have the same mechanism transposed to GitHub at some point. And as Michael already checked that, or Daniel, or I don't know, I think that they were planning to do that at some point to check if it's possible to have the same mechanism inside GitHub. But I don't know if the status, I mean, if they already started that investigation.
So from an Atala perspective, we've had the conversation. One way that we're currently thinking about it is that we just want to stop using Jira for all new tickets. So progressively, sort of the tickets should be more and more in GitHub, and then we can manage them there together with the community, like as maintainers. So I think that sort of simplifies things because we don't have to sort of create bridges and two-way syncs and sort of difficult types of solutions. And it poses an opportunity to sort of say, hey, now we have a blank slate. How do we want to manage this project while setting very clear expectations to the community? And Anushka, I see you have your hand raised. I want to add another question that is directly to you. Is something like a now, next, later format for a roadmap? It's like, is that clear enough in setting expectations for users, or do you think that they would need like dates and like, oh, this is going to be this quarter, or it's going to be, how should we deal with that?
Yeah, good questions. So what we've heard from people who have asked us about the roadmap is, I'm busy building my product and I need to understand what is in the Atala pipeline so that I can plan out my development for my product, right? So people are looking at, how does our roadmap influence their product roadmaps, to answer the first question. And then to answer the second question, I think most technical people understand that, you know, you can thumb suck a date and give it your best guess, but when it comes to technology, you've got to leave it to the technology gods to make sure it lands when it lands. So I think from that perspective, now, next, later does make sense. And maybe if we can put a little timeline as an indicator, because I see Shota also asked in the chat, like, what does now, what's the difference between next and later? What does it mean? So I think if we can give an indication as to what we mean by now, next, or later, or just label it as, I don't know, within the next 3 months, next 6 months, and later.
So one of the things I can quickly respond to that is, so within Atala we have like monthly releases. So the idea was to keep milestones, which are the release dates. So you could say, well, we're working on something now, and it's tagged with the milestone, I don't know, 2.8, which is the December release. So you could, that I think would give enough information to cover both of those things. You could also say, well, there is something in the next thing which is for the 2.7 release, because it could be a very small thing. So you could, what I like about the construct is that it because it is a little bit gray, it's easy to form a mental image and saying, oh yeah, I see you're doing this and I see it's next. And we can, of course, I think we can say, well, hey, next is probably somewhere in the next 3 months. Like, because we also need to limit the work in progress anyway to what can be maintained by a community, and say, so there will not be, should not be 50 items in the now column. Like, there should be like really, I think the now column is maybe a sprint, or like a month, like 2 weeks to a month time type periods. Like, you should expect this coming really, really soon. And if we want to be more clear, we can tag like a milestone to it and say, yes, this will likely be in our 2.7 release or 2.8 release or whatever.
That sounds logical. It'll be nice for Shota to say what he thinks as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I don't know what to click to raise my hand. Sorry. So,
No worries.
my concern was about the tickets, the moving from Jira to this GitHub tool, the alternative.
Mhm.
Don't remember the name, but I think the idea was the tickets should be public as well. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, what exactly is the purpose of it, and wouldn't be a problematic if we want to, because right now in Jira we usually like leave some documents or some references that are not necessarily public, and also there might be a chance in the future we might be working with some external vendors or some providers that might exchange some documents. We would need a place to reference them. A ticket is a good place for that, and sometimes they are not public. So wouldn't it be a problem? And what are the benefits of having those tickets public anyway?
So I think the benefits for that are that we can very clearly set expectation because we're working in the open. And I think the mental model that I have at least is saying, hey, issues are things we can talk about and plan and sort of elaborate on. So your typical epic or user story, where we say, hey, we want to sort of do something valuable. And then pull requests are sort of like are basically taking chunks out of that issue. So either one pull request like solves an entire issue, or like multiple pull requests like cover an issue. Having those be public, in my view, are no problem. Touching on Benjamin's question, and this adds to the value of doing it in public, like we will be prioritizing as maintainers with the community. In these calls, these bi-weekly calls, we are going to have conversations about, hey, look, guys, we have like a lot of stuff in our next bucket, which are elaborated, and yeah, we want to work on it. Some of it you will see from the discussions around the tickets, where people are very passionate about them and say, hey, we want to do this. And in some cases, these could be Atala people. In other cases, it could be other people that would like to contribute to that. And I think this is part of this transition out of Atala into a community of maintainers, by saying, if we want to be inviting to external contributors, we're going to have to work in the open and have to sort of give people a voice and a vote in the prioritization. Because obviously, given that Atala and IO offers a lot of paid contributions to this, doesn't mean we're alone. And I think we can only be good stewards if we are very inviting and very open. Also, as maintainers, I think we need to make sure we maintain a high level of quality, or like from the security thing, hey, we're not going to do this, and here's why. That should be a community decision, ultimately driven by the maintainers, but not sort of forced upon the community by just one single person.
Okay, who would propose? I mean, it depends on this question. Who would propose is this like we plan this to be like fully self-governing idea? Well, the maintainers, they propose ticket themselves, they do this themselves, or it's just
not
somehow.
Yeah, so not entirely, and it's a shame that Lohan isn't here, because Lohan has worked on governance for this group. So if you look at I don't know if it was last meeting or the meeting before that, there's a steering committee for this Hyperledger Lab. That steering committee is to ensure that sort of the long-term direction of the project is guaranteed. They meet once a quarter. I'm part of that. Block Trust is part of that as well, and we're trying to get more outside sort of input from that to make sure it's like fair and balanced representation of the community. They basically set the enabling constraints in which like any maintainer and contributor can work. And then within that, it's fair game. It's up to the community to decide where this project should go and how it should be prioritized. Do they care more about privacy? Do they care more about a new feature? Do they care more about performance? We're coming from a situation where it was very simply a decision by an owner saying this is what we need to be doing. Now it needs to be much more a dialogue with the community and give them a voice. And I guess we'll have to figure out how we can make that work effectively. I see 2 hands raised, and I realize that we've already gone over by 6 minutes. So I want to give the opportunity for the people that had their hand raised to speak up, and then I think I'd like to close also because we all have other stuff to do and places to be. So Esteban, famous last words. Oh, you're on mute, Esteban.
Oh, sorry. No, you actually already pointed out one of the things that I wanted to mention, and is that we are not alone anymore. We also have the community, and also we need to start figuring out how to leverage the community. And I think the roadmap is something important. I guess at the beginning, the roadmap is going to be a lot of the work that is going to be done and led by the Atala tribe. But eventually, we will need to consider also work that may be done by the community members. So achieving that balance and also leveraging that the power of the community is something that we need to see as a benefit, because that's why we are doing all this open source to get the benefit of having the community also contributing to the project. So I think that you already noted those points out. So I think that we are in a good path regarding that.
Okay. Well, that's then a good note to end on. I want to thank you all for your participation. Fayat will keep us up to date in the Discord channel as well with regards to the announcement that we're going to make and the community kickoff call. Please share it with all your friends, with everybody who you think is interested in that, and let's make sure we get off to a good start. And to Esteban's point, yes, there's a period of migration going to happen, but I do believe that that will happen quite gradually. So let's make sure we set it up correctly. We are as open and inviting as we can under our Hyperledger Lab umbrella, and continue to do good work and sort of push the project forward for the community and with the community. So thanks all, and we see each other again in another meeting.
Thanks all. Have a good day all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, everyone. Bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.